Steelers almost stalled them in the starting blocks. Pittsburgh ran up over 500 yards of total offense, but managed to reach the end zone only once, on Mark Malone's 9-yard keeper. Meanwhile, the Chiefs benefited from a truly special day from their special teams. Deron Cherry fell on this block punt for one score. And for the first time since 1969, the Chiefs returned to kickoff for a touchdown. Boyce Green escaped from the Steelers' evil clutches to go 97 yards. And while Kansas City's offense played like yesterday's lunch, generating only 171 total yards, their special teams played like there was no tomorrow. There will be a tomorrow for the Chiefs, as Lloyd Burris' 78-yard return of this blocked field goal sealed a 24-19 victory that sends them into the playoffs for the first time since 1971. The future looks bright as the Chiefs will face the sliding New York Jets in the AFC wild-card game. The future of the Raiders may rest on the arm of a new young quarterback. But it was the Colts who may have been thinking about a new quarterback in the early going. Jerry Robinson plucked this wounded duck out of the sky and raced to his second touchdown of the season. And the Colts were sitting ducks for Todd Christensen, as the league's leading receiver broke his own season record for receptions by a tight end and scored twice. But the Colts, reborn under Ron Meyer, found new life in the second half. Albert Bentley's 70-yard touchdown scamper sparked a rare Colt comeback. And with Gary Hogeboom finally connecting, Colt fans may be asking, Vinny who? Hogeboom's second touchdown pass to Bill Brooks clinched the Colts' third straight victory, 30-24. These Colts have high hopes for next season. Speaking of high hopes, maybe the Jets thought that if they put all their heads together, they could find a way to win. Maybe they thought that if they got off on the right foot against Cincinnati, they could march away victorious. With a playoff spot already assured, the Jets were hoping to end the regular season on a high note. And Bobby Humphrey's 96-yard return of the opening kickoff was sweet music to New York. They looked ready to bury their 4-game losing streak and took a 21-17 halftime lead, thanks to 2 Freeman McNeil touchdowns. But it was the Jets who were buried, as quarterback Ken O'Brien never got on track. Meanwhile, Bengals quarterback Boomer Esiason had a spectacular day, the best of his 3-year career. He connected with 8 different receivers for a whopping 425 yards and 5 touchdown passes, including one to tackle-eligible Anthony Munoz, number 78, and 3 to wide receiver Chris Collinsworth. Despite the Bengals' 52-21 rout of the Jets, Cincinnati will miss the playoffs thanks to New England's Monday night win. The Boomers' heroics were for naught, and he'll watch the Jets limp into the wild card game on the heels of 5 straight losses. In last week's Super Bowl, but in the early going against Denver, it appeared that their winning streak and slight playoff chances would be shot down by the rifle arm of John Elway. Elway's scoring strike to Orson Mobley bore an uncanny resemblance to the famous Montana to Clark touchdown that decided the 1981 NFC title. Unfortunately for Denver, it was the only time all afternoon that the Broncos came close to looking like a champion. Seattle quarterback Dave Craig hit on 17 of 21 passes, including 2 touchdown tosses to Darrell Turner, number 81. Turner's end zone dancing clearly turned on the Seattle faithful, but his choreography paled in comparison to the moves of running back Kurt Warner, number 28. Warner's 60-yard touchdown dash late in the fourth quarter was symbolic of Seattle's season. By crushing the Broncos 41-16, the Seahawks finished the year full of run in a desperate but ultimately futile attempt to make the playoffs. Another saint named Nick inspired a holiday atmosphere of gift-giving, and no group of people were more generous in that regard than the Tampa Bay punt coverage unit. Rookie Pro Bowl punt returner Vai Sakahima took full advantage of the Bucs' benevolence by returning not 1, but 2 punts for scores. Tampa Bay neatly gift-wrapped this 21-17 Cardinal victory. In losing, however, the 2-14 Bucs might have gained the best Christmas present of all, a clear shot at Vinny Testaverde in next year's draft. Giant head coach Bill Parcells had good reason to be smiling. After all, only the lowly Packers could keep his team from gaining home field advantage in the playoffs. But like Santa Claus and the Buccaneers' special teams, Phil Simms was in a very charitable mood. Ken Still's 58-yard touchdown run on an interception only put a momentary scare into New York. For like they have done all season long, the Giants overcame a little adversity and found a way to win. Tom Flynn's blocked punt and subsequent score carried with it a certain amount of sweet irony. Only a few months before, Flynn had been unceremoniously cut by the Packers. After the game, he described his play as poetic justice. What tight end Mark Bavaro had to say after the game, however, probably had very little to do with poetry. The quiet Bavaro continued to speak loudly with his actions, snaring 2 touchdowns and going over 1,000 yards receiving for the first time in his career. Bavaro's play in 1986 has made some people forget the fact that the Giants possess another truly talented tight end, Zeke Moat, number 84. The Giants' 14th victory was their easiest as they crushed Green Bay 55-24. Not only did they set a team record for wins in a season, but they also wrapped up the home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. This team will not be hitting the road again this season, unless, of course, consecutive losses to the playoff-bound Giants and Broncos. Redskin quarterback Jay Schroeder had thrown far more interceptions than touchdowns. In the regular season finale against the Eagles, head coach Joe Gibbs hoped that Schroeder would regain his mid-season form. But for 3 straight quarters, it simply wasn't Jay's day. Number 43, Roynell Young, picked off 2 of 3 interceptions offered up by Schroeder. And an Eagle defense that was embarrassed by these same Redskins in the regular season's first week was determined to make amends in the season's last week. Fired up Phillies sacked Schroeder 3 times, forced a fumble, and led 14-0 with only a quarter to play. But then Schrader would fire balls straight into the ground or right at Eagle defenders, suddenly threw a perfect pass, threading the needle to tight end Clint Didier to cut Philadelphia's lead in half. While the Eagles' front line of Matador blockers gave up a league record 103rd and 104th sack of the year in the fourth quarter, Washington's Hogs protected Jay, who found Don Warren in the end zone with 8.5 minutes to play. Deadlocked at 14, the Redskins proved why they had won 11 games, and the Eagles proved why they had won only 5. Passes dropped for 3 quarters were caught, and George Rogers, stopped for 3 quarters, couldn't be, as Washington scored 3 unanswered touchdowns to come from behind and win 21-14. 3 straight losses would not be any way to begin the playoffs, and a halftime tirade by Joe Gibbs earned him a game ball, a victory, and momentum as the Skins prepare for Eric Dickerson and the Rams in round 1 of the playoffs. A Week 15 loss to Houston ended Minnesota's playoff dreams, but the Vikings went out in a blaze of glory, as they say, against the New Orleans Saints. Sore-thumbed Tommy Kramer watched as strong-armed Wade Wilson fired 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Steve Jordan, as the Vikings rolled 33-17. This season, the Vikes scored the most points in team history, but in the end, it was defensive coordinator Floyd Peters who got most of the victory champagne. In San Francisco, a real battle for the bubbly took place on Friday night, as head coaches John Robinson and Bill Walsh both hoped to be smiling after a game that would determine the division championship. Last season, the Rams held off the surging 49ers to win the division. This season, they couldn't, as Joe Montana and Jerry Rice staked the home Niners to a 10-0 lead. While Rice is San Francisco's home run hitter, Eric Dickerson is still Los Angeles' battering ram. Eric cut the lead to 10-7, but a pair of scores, one by Joe Cribbs and another by tight end Russ Francis, iced the NFC Western Division title for San Francisco. The 24-14 loss forced the Rams to practice through Christmas and fly 3,000 miles to Washington's RFK Stadium, where they were crushed in the playoffs 3 years ago, 51-7. However, in Municipal Stadium, the fanciest steps were taken by the Chargers' Gary Anderson, number 40, en route to a spectacular 65-yard touchdown. But even a play destined for the Broken Field Runners Hall of Fame was overshadowed by an absolute victory by the AFC's best team. Blending trick plays that outflanked the Chargers with basic ones that easily bored through them, the Browns cruised to their 5th straight victory. Quarterback Bernie Kosar carved up the Chargers, and number 86 Brian Brennan caught 7 passes for 176 yards and a touchdown. The underachieving San Diego secondary helped the Browns to a 47-17 victory, as Cleveland enters the championship chase with the best record in their history. The Bills' Jim Kelly has not yet found the glory trail, but in the Astrodome, site of his USFL glory days, he displayed the touch that promises brighter days ahead for Buffalo. Kelly's touchdown to Chris Burkett was the Bills' only score in a game where hard-hitting defense and offensive futility went hand in hand. The Oilers' fifth victory was spurred by number 91, linebacker Johnny Means, who became a permanent member of the Bills' backfield. Houston's 16-7 win was not pretty, and pretty was not the word to describe the game between the Lions and Falcons. Rookie quarterback Chuck Long, number 16, had a woeful day, but so did many of his teammates. The Falcons flew around the field, but in gaining altitude for their seventh victory, they survived a few forced landings. Lloyd Dixon scored a gutty touchdown for Atlanta, while Pete Manley's 81-yard punt return was the Lions' only score. Manley's touchdown could not prevent the Lions' seventh loss at home, while the Falcons' 20-6 win could not preserve the job of head coach Dan Henning. The Chicago Bear defense has spiked many innovative offensive ideas, and when the Cowboys set up a trial balloon at quarterback named Reggie Collier, the Bears sent him crashing to earth like the Hindenburg. Behind an offensive line that allowed 7 sacks, Collier was battered. The beleaguered quarterback also fumbled twice and threw 2 interceptions. As the once luminescent Cowboys slipped into the darkness of their first losing season since 1964, a brief reminder of their bright past was provided by Mike Renfro, number 82. While the Bear defense set a gridiron record for allowing the fewest points in a 16-game season, their offense remained in gridlock. Quarterback Doug Flutie, whose sidearm motion seems more suited to skimming stones than throwing footballs, passed for 2 touchdowns. Number 35, Neil Anderson, caught 1, and the other went to Willie Gault, number 83. The bickering Bears won 24-10 and march into the playoffs with a glittering 14-2 record. In the final game in the Orange Bowl for the Miami Dolphins, it was the New England Patriots that needed the victory. A win and the Patriots were AFC East champions. A loss and they were out of the playoffs. This Stanley Morgan touchdown catch in the first quarter helped New England jump in front 10-0. But the Dolphins came back in the second half on the arm of the spectacular Dan Marino, who threw 2 scoring passes to wide receiver Mark Clayton, number 83. Clayton's second touchdown came early in the final quarter, and it propelled the Dolphins into a 27-20 lead. It was now do-or-die time for the Patriots and their veteran quarterback Steve Grogan, who had replaced injured starter Tony Eason in the first half. In the final 7 minutes, Grogan vaulted the Patriots to the win and the playoffs, throwing 2 scoring strikes, 1 to Tony Collins and the game winner to Stanley Morgan with less than a minute remaining in the game. On this historic night in Miami, the New England Patriots grabbed the spotlight with an exciting 34-27 victory, and with it, their first AFC.
Life on the ranch sure hasn't changed much. But neither has E.J. Hollow, who in the 1960s was a linebacker and center for the Kansas City Chiefs. In Super Bowl history, he has the distinction of being the only player to start on both defense and offense. In 1970, E.J. traded in his uniform and stepped into his favorite old cowboy boots. The Crossbell Ranch in Copan, Oklahoma is every cowboy's dream. Owned by the Mullendorf family, this 40,000-acre, 100-horse western oasis is managed by E.J. Holub. It is a setting where he is most at home.
I've been here at the Mullendorf Crossbell Ranch for 11 years now. We primarily work with cutting horses. What I mean by cutting horses is taking the cow away from the herd and teaching the horse to hold the cow from trying to get back to the other cattle.
There is big money in cutting horses. In competitions such as this, a winning horse can earn in excess of $1 million in a given year. Similar to a linebacker taking on a wide receiver, E.J. has trained his horse to match and follow every move of his opponent without giving the horse any instructions.
This is what we call a mechanical cow cutter. This is operate with remote control. We use this basically as training and starting young horses, such as when this cow moves, this horse will move with the cow.
E.J. Holub is a man who has succeeded in doing what he loves most. In a sense, he is not a former football player, but a cowboy who just happened to have played football.
You know, as soon as I had hung my cleats up, well, I didn't regret hanging them up because I cherished the moments and the friends and all the people that I was associated with, the people I met. I feel like I'm one of the very fortunate few that go through life and get a chance to do something that they've always wanted to do as a child, and I've always wanted to do this. I don't think anybody in the football profession or after they leave enjoys it more than I.
But that does not mean E.J. did not enjoy his playing days. Plagued with numerous knee injuries, his teammates used to say that E.J. would keep playing till the day they'd have to carry him away. Today, he saunters like a real cowboy, in spite of 12 knee operations, earning him a place in the Guinness Book of World Records as the professional athlete with the most knee surgeries.
The knees are fine. I mean, I'm still able to ride the horse. I only have like 30% mobility in my left knee, and I'm waiting for Gunsmoke to come back because I'm going to try out for Chester and Gunsmoke with his stiff leg.
I had 10 years in professional football. That's basically a long career. Everybody has to give it up. My ending was a little more dramatic. I went from being a professional football player to somebody in a wheelchair.
That described both strong safety Carl Koselke and the Minnesota Vikings during the 60s. Wild and crazy on and off the field. Carl's career ended not on the gridiron, but in the crash of metal and man on pavement, when he was paralyzed for life in a 1973 motorcycle accident. For Carl, there would not be one last play.
There was no way I could come back and be a strong safety in a wheelchair. That was pretty well defined.
But that incredible Koselke laugh and sense of humor helped him through a rough beginning, along with the fact that he married his nurse.
To spend 6 months in the hospital and marry my nurse, I really feel fortunate. We're a neat team together. To her, me being in a wheelchair is no big deal.
It is also no big deal to their 7-year-old son, Christopher.
To me, he is really a rich blessing. To him, his dad really isn't really at all handicapped. He just wheels rather than walks. Being in a wheelchair is more of an inconvenience than a handicap. I drive my own car. I've got the ramps instead of steps. I've got a stairway elevator to get down. I think when you're in a wheelchair, especially for 12 years, it's as big or as little as you want to make it. To me, it's just a way of getting around. Otherwise, I'm no different than anybody. I really love to have a good time. I look at the positive things in life. I look at the things that I can do rather than things that I can't do. Being a competitive person, I wanted to be the best that I could be. I wasn't going to let life pass me by. I was going to basically contribute rather than to take.
He's written a book and a newspaper column, done some coaching and speaking, and now works as a goodwill ambassador for Blue Cross, knowing full well the impact of hospital stays and bills. His accomplishments during and after football are many, but it is his work with Broken Wing Outreach that is closest to his heart.
God bless you. How did your accident?
Carl visits newly disabled people in the hospital with first-hand words of hope and encouragement.
You'll have to tell them, I'll have to give you an autograph. The whole number 29 of the Minnesota Life.
Okay.
Through this Christian fellowship program, he helps with their fears and frustrations of the known and the
So
unknown.
much time in the hospital, I married my nurse. I kid her, I said, I'm living proof hanky-panky goes out of those hospitals.
And Carl openly shares with others the strength he found to get him through when he turned to faith.
It's a joy to say I'm happier now in a wheelchair than I've ever been. And that's only because of my family, and really because of my strong faith in our Lord and the many blessings He's given me. Being in a wheelchair basically is my way of life. I don't really let any grass go underneath my wheels.
A man who's probably happier than anybody in the Browns organization. He's the owner of the Cleveland Browns, Mr. Art Modell. Art, thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Nice being here, Len.
Our inside sources tell us that you had something to say in the locker room after the game, which is a rare thing for you. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Well, I don't think I've spoken to the team as a group in 15 years, but I felt a compulsion because the game and the performance of the team against Cincinnati reminded me so much of the 1964 championship game when we defeated the Baltimore Colts. And I want to express how proud I was of each and every one of the players and the coaching staff, because it was a truly remarkable game.
Now, also, if they win Sunday, that will give them as many or more victories as any team that has been with the Cleveland Browns. Is this team that good?
Well, we have balance, and we've overcome great adversity. I look back, it seems like yesterday that poor Donnie Rogers died of a cocaine overdose, and that left a tremendous emotional impact on the team. And then we lost Barner for the year, we lost Danielson for the year. So the team obviously has some character to it. We're not leading anything statistically, offense or defense, but we do have balance. And obviously we have a good chemistry that has been developing over a period of weeks now, and we really haven't peaked yet. I think the best is yet to come.
All right, I've watched your quarterback, Bernie Kosar, all the way from the days at the University of Miami. This man, in just his second year, has poise and maturity. What's your opinion on
Nick,
Bernie?
let me say this to you. I've been in football 26 years, and before that, I was one of the early Giant season ticket holders back in the late 40s. And I watched all the great quarterbacks. I have never seen a youngster mature and grow as a quarterback as rapidly as Bernie Kosar. And he is an ugly quarterback. He throws off the wrong foot. He's off balance. He's not squaring his shoulders. He's a sidearm thrower, but he gets the job done. He has enormous intellect, and he has earned the respect of his teammates. And they think he's outstanding, and he is. And he's going to be a great, great performer.
All right, you know something, they're saying the same thing about Vinny Testaverde being an ugly quarterback. But I want to ask you about your head coach, Marty Schottenheimer. You know, Lenny and I know Marty because of our playing days. But back when you replaced Sam Ratigliano with Marty Schottenheimer, Marty was your defensive coordinator. He was untested. Why did you have such great trust and confidence in him?
We got the heck kicked out of us by Minnesota in the last preseason game of whatever year it was, 1983 or 84. And I had a meeting at my home because I thought we were going to go down the tubes unless we do something dramatically. And Marty Schottenheimer sat in my home and said, give me this season and next season and I will produce the best defense in the National Football League. And he did.
And that was it.
And I might also say this year, before the season, he came into my office. He said, Art, what do you expect of the team and of me? I said, tell you what, win the division title with a record good enough to host the playoff games, and I will be satisfied.
All right,
I got a clairvoyant.
Stay with us because we want to talk to you more about NFL issues.
You are now, and you have been very much involved in the activities in the National Football League. You're a mover and a shaker, and you have a unique and personal relationship with Commissioner Pete Rozelle. And Pete has been through an awful lot the last few years. How has he been able to hang in there and stay with it?
Well, he's staying in there, and he's hanging tough, Len, but I believe it's taken its toll, both physically and emotionally. He's been through an awful lot, but he's come out of recent months as strong as he was years ago, but it's been a very, very rough period for him, particularly as it relates to litigation.
I tell you, you get, to me, it looks like two big problems coming up. First is the television contract with the networks, and secondly, contract between the Players Association and the owners. Looking at that particular point, agents say they want free agency, and of course the owners are talking about mandatory drug testing. You know, how can these things be resolved?
Well, I'm not on the management council. I'm not going to speak for the ownership of the league, but as a personal view, I don't believe that drug testing and free agency are interchangeable, or are they bargaining chips? And putting free agency aside and let Jack Donlin and his people wrestle with that, but I have some very deeply felt views about drug testing. We experienced the death of Donnie Rogers, despite the fact that the Cleveland Browns had the best drug rehabilitation program in professional sports. But it came up short in the case of Donnie Rogers. Now, all I want are people to come up with an alternative to random mandatory testing, or unscheduled testing, if that's a less harsh word, and to come up with a plan that will serve as a deterrent to get these kids to stay sober. And it's imperative that we do that. We have an obligation to the public, obligation to each other, and we've got to lick that problem.
All right, you know, you're chairman of the TV committee, and that's a real important committee for the NFL owners, because this is sort of a lifeline for the owners. Now, it's my understanding that Al Davis really wants to get out of the pooling agreement with the owners and put his Raiders on paid television. Is this a real threat, and what will this do to the league if it happened?
Well, we're going to try our darndest, Nick, that it doesn't happen. And it would be chaotic if it did. The strength of the National Football League came about in 1962 when the Congress allowed us to pool our revenues and share them equally, where the Green Bay Packers would have the same income as the New York Giants. This has given us the competitive balance on the playing field. Now, if somebody's going to pull out and go its own way, it's going to be it'll be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle, and we're not going to take it sitting down.
Well, my understanding is there was a meeting a few years ago that addressed cable television money, and you said you wanted that money put into a pool. What happened as a result of that?
It was a meeting in Hawaii, and I proposed a resolution as chairman of the committee, the television committee, that all revenues, regardless of source, which includes cable, continue to be shared equally by all teams so that we can preserve the competitive balance. And the vote was 27-0 with one pass, and the pass vote was LA Raiders.
One other thing is the violence in the National Football League. Is this really a threat to the league, and what are the owners going to do about it?
Well, speaking again for myself, I propose to put more teeth in our rules. A 15-yard penalty is insufficient, inadequate, to serve as a deterrent to somebody. The McMahon incident, the Lewis Lips incident, the one with Manley the other day, these things should not happen. It's in the heat of battle. It's understandable, but unacceptable.
Art, I go back to you. The first year you were with the Cleveland Browns, I was a member of that team. Now, that's 26 years ago. Now, let me ask you, if you go to and win the Super Bowl, is there any chance you might get out of the game?
Oh, I don't know. You know, then I was sick in 1983, and my health will be a consideration. I think if I went to Pasadena this year, I'd enjoy it so much that I wouldn't give it a second thought.
Thank you very much for
joining
us on the show.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
That special person is Bob Golick of the Cleveland Browns. After spending his college years at Notre Dame University starting at linebacker, he was drafted by the New England Patriots, where the Browns picked him up on waivers in 1982 and moved him to a new position.
It is a unique position. I've heard some people say it's like playing in the middle of a freeway. How do you describe playing nose tackle?
Well, you know, they tell you, when I first came in, they said your job is to occupy the center of the line, the center and both guards, and keep them away from the linebackers because they make more money than you do. So I came in, and I guess I really didn't realize how physical a position it was until I got involved. Doug Deacon described it best. He said playing nose tackle is like being a fire hydrant at a dog show. You're basically the center of attention.
Being center of attention on the football field and receiving raise for his ornately decorated locker.
But in the early going against Denver, it appeared that their winning streak and slight playoff chances would be shot down by the rifle arm of John Elway. Elway's scoring strike to Orson Mobley bore an uncanny resemblance to the famous Montana to Clark touchdown that decided the 1981 NFC title. Unfortunately for Denver, it was the only time all afternoon that the Broncos came close to looking like a champion. Seattle quarterback Dave Craig hit on 17 of 21 passes, including 2 touchdown tosses to Darrell Turner, number 81. Turner's end zone dancing clearly turned on the Seattle faithful, but his choreography paled in comparison to the moves of running back Kurt Warner, number 28. Warner's 60-yard touchdown dash late in the fourth quarter was symbolic of Seattle's season. By crushing the Broncos 41-16, the Seahawks finished the year full of run in a desperate but ultimately futile attempt to make the playoffs.